Afternoon. So today I'm looking at an album I like a lot in 2002, 2001 maybe. Actually sure. Royksopp's Melody A.M. 2001. Melody A.M. So that's 22 years old this year. Jeez, just feels like it feels just like a couple of months ago it came out, and the music feels quite modern as well. Although it certainly has the feeling of that time as well, the that kind of genre. But Royksopp are a Norwegian electronic band, electronic in a broad sense, I guess. At this time, electronic down tempo, ambient. They've kind of progressed through to more of a house and almost like electro pop or synth pop um, element in their later albums. But this one, yeah, this one not so much. But anyway, it's a good album. So Royksopp, like I said, Norwegian. It's two guys. It's a duo, Sven Berg and Torbjorn Brundtland. Torbjorn. You know, in English, Torbjorn translates to translates to Thor's bear. I think Torbjorn, Thor's bear. But they're from Tromsø, which is way, way up north of Norway, like above the Arctic Circle. And I was reading about this the other week, and if you know the electronic music artist Biosphere, I don't know his real name. He's Norwegian as well. He's from Tromsø as well. So I thought that's quite because I really like his stuff. He's got some excellent stuff. I don't own any of his, any albums, but I listen to him a lot on Spotify. I recommend Biosphere. But I was just interested to hear that he came from the same town as them. Also, the guitarist from Emperor, Samoth, he's from there as well. So for a small town, I think it's about like it's less than 100,000 population. They're producing a fair number of successful musicians. I'm sure there are others as well. Anyway, as for this album, I got this on one of my trips to Japan. And I actually forgot that this was from Japan. The reason I remembered is because on the back it has the information in Japanese and says made in Japan. And then I remembered, oh yeah, I did get this in Japan. Um, it's a nice kind of brown uh, tone on the CD. You don't really often see brown used as a color for a CD, but it kind of matches the aesthetic of the artwork on the front, which is kind of like a, I don't know, maybe is it dusk or dawn sky, and it has kind of a brownish tint to it as well. Also there, you can see very lightly, you can see the two, or at least one of the faces of the guy in a kind of a forest, I think. And some credits. And they have, as they often do, there they are, there's the two guys, Sven and Torbjorn. Acknowledgements. And you see here, this is from Toshiba EMI. So I would assume that means that in Japan, that EMI is in a partnership with Toshiba. So what you often find with albums released in Asian countries, that the record companies often are in partnership in those countries with other companies, and they use names like that, Toshiba EMI, like yeah, I'm not sure the exact reason. I won't go into that too far, but and then you have the Japanese liner notes as well. So I guess the exact same information, but in Japanese. And underneath the English titles, they have the katakana reading. So katakana is actually quite easy to learn. You probably learn it like an afternoon if you study enough. I learned it and I've since forgotten it, but basically it would be Paulina would be Poa Rino. In space would be inu spesu. Sparkusu. So the kind of Japanified pronunciation of English. They use katakana script to do that. Any, not just English, any foreign language, they use katakana to represent that. Anyway, it's a great album. It starts off with So Easy, and that uses a sample from Blue on Blue, that like 1950s or early 1960s, Blue on Blue. I think it's Bobby Darin. Um, and to be honest, actually, that's probably one of my least favorite songs on the album, and I don't think it's the greatest opener. But the second song there, Epel or Epel, is great. I remember the first time I heard that back in 2001, I loved it. And it's kind of like, it's hard to describe. It's like, it's got a beat, obviously, boom, boom, ba, boom, 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 but, and then I kind of put keyboards over the top of it, like kind of squeaks and beepy keyboards. It's and then the way it kind of changes. It's actually one of their more famous songs, so you might have heard it before. But it's I just yeah, it's I'm not going to try to describe this song. It's got a cool video as well. They use like these old photographs, and they kind of zoom into each photograph, and it kind of zooms and zooms again to different scenes within the photograph. Um, Sparks is a good song. In Space is probably my favorite song on the album. That's a beautiful song. It starts with kind of strings, and it has kind of a light beat, and then it kind of almost has like a harp sound, or like like these plucked string sounds. It's I really like that song, and I have good memories of it. I have good like corresponding experiences in my life where that I was listening to that song, or that song was part of my life at that time. But it really is a great song, In Space. So I'd say In Space is my favorite song on the album, followed by Eppel. Paulino, I don't necessarily like the vocal in that. Um, a Higher Place, yep, not bad. Royksopp's Night Out, that's a great song. Um, it's kind of got an urgent feel to it. It feels like it's like it's trying to get a point across in some way. And I've talked about this before. Nick Hornby wrote a book. I think it's called 31 Songs, and he talks about just random songs, and he kind of explains why he likes them, and again, maybe how they connect to some part of his life. And one of the songs he writes about is Royksopp's Night Out. Um, Remind Me, I think, was another single from this, and that's kind of the vocal on that's a bit better. I think it's the same guy who does Paulino, maybe, but it's more of kind of a laid back song, a down tempo song. A Higher Place, I think that's the one. Okay, mixed about. I think that's the one where it sounds. The woman who sings it, the vocalist, is trying her best to sound exactly like. There's the window closing, like the vocalist from Portishead, saying Beth Gibbons or Gibbons, to the point that it's almost ridiculous. It's almost like a substandard Portishead song. I think that's A Higher Place. Geez, so, and then 40 Years Back. I really like that song as well. For the first minute and a half, it's got this really different and unique intro. It starts off with, yeah, again, it's very hard for me to describe electronic music because it's got these beeps and these bloops and these zips, but it kind of, it's the way it builds up. It's almost quite bizarre. It's almost like Pink Floydian. It has these like laughing in the background and people kind of talking, and it does that for like a minute or a minute and a half, and then it just kind of drops off, and for the rest of the song, it's just kind of this spaced out, down tempo, chill song of just almost like a processed guitar sound. But the first little part of it, it reminds me of like, I don't know, Alice in Wonderland or something. I don't know. I don't know why I associate Alice in Wonderland. Maybe there's a reason why I associate Alice in Wonderland with that. but I would like to hear them if they kind of carried the song on in the same vein as that of the first minute of that 40 years back. Maybe it's 40 years back / come. That's why they sound so different. It's just two different songs within the one song. And then there's a Paulino remix. I think the remix, I prefer the remix in the original version of this. Maybe that just might be on the Japanese version. I'm not sure. So yeah, like I said, secondhand in Japan, I would guess this was about 600 yens, probably about $6. I think I remember it being $6 New Zealand, which is about $3 or $4 American. I own pretty much the entire Royksopp discography, so I was going to do like a separate video for each album. Maybe not the entire, but most of them. One of them I don't have the case. I've only got the disc for. But I'd say they all have good points. And it's hard to pick out one Royksopp album that I think is the best of their career. Maybe The Understanding, maybe. But I think this one's pretty good as well. And like I said, it still sounds modern, even though it's 22 years ago, 22 years old. It still sounds modern. It doesn't sound too dated, but it's at the same time saying that it does have that early 2000s down tempo, house-ish, electronic feel to some of the ones, especially the songs that have vocals, like Paulino and So Easy. So I prefer the songs that don't stray into that as much, like Apple and In Space and Royksopp's Night Out. I think they're more timeless, those songs, more original, unique. So yeah. So glad to have this in my collection. And I'd like to go back to Japan one day and do some more shopping. When I say I went to Japan, like I think I said in another video that I lived in Japan for 2 years. Well, I was working there in about 2006 or 2008, and then when I was in between, other things happened, and then I was living in Korea and working in Korea, and to travel from Korea to Japan is relatively cheap. Sometimes very cheap. Sometimes you can get air tickets midweek for like less than $100 if you shop around. And so I would travel very cheaply to Japan. I would buy a cheap ticket. I would stay cheap accommodation. Wouldn't eat in restaurants. Just buy food from the supermarket or food from 7-Eleven. They've got pretty good convenience stores there with pretty good food. And then I would usually walk everywhere. I'd walk. And I'm not just doing it just to be cheap. I do that because I when I travel, I like walking. You get the feel of a city when you walk. And then I'd usually sleep in the airport on the night before I left as well. I'd kind of save a night's accommodation by sleeping in the airport. So I could travel. I'm pretty adept at traveling pretty cheaply. I've done that in a few different places. It's easy to do that when you're alone. When you're traveling with your family, obviously you can't expect them to do that, so it's a bit more expensive. But yeah, by doing that, I was able to spend money on other things like secondhand CDs. And Japan is probably one of the best places on earth to shop for secondhand CDs. All right, we'll leave it there. Thank you for watching.